Today, I'm going to show you how to make your own custom simulator script using Verse. With this, you can have custom enemies with their own health assigned to them, as well as custom damage values assigned to each player that can be increased whenever you'd like. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into the tutorial. So to get started, let's go into our Verse Explorer, hit right click, add a new Verse file to project, and I'm going to call this our simulator manager, and then hit create. And let's go ahead and open it up. And the very first thing we need to do is create our custom player class that holds different player values. To do this, I first need to actually create that class. So I'm going to do that up here, and I'm going to call this our simulator custom player, and it's going to be of type class. Make sure to put an underscore there. And in this, we want this to have a player like so. And then we also want an amount, which I'm going to call a var, and that's going to be player's damage of type float. So now we have a class that we can create for each player. We need to actually create that for each player. So in our creative device, let's go ahead and create a map. So that's going to be a variable of type, I'll call it our player map. To create a map, you'll put player in brackets like this, and then put the variable type that you're trying to link with this player key to a empty map like so. Now we actually have a map that we can store players in. We want to go ahead and initialize all the players. So I'll go through every single player in our play space by doing this, and for every single player I want to initialize that player, which doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and go down here and initialize that player. We'll take in an agent, return nothing, and for now I'm just going to put a block here because there's one more thing I want to do, and that is initialize players who are joining the game. So to do that, I'll write get play space dot player added event dot subscribe, and I'll go subscribe to our initialize function like so. Now in this initialize function, I want to add the player to this player map. To do that, I'll first check if they're already in the player map by writing if player exists is equal to player map agent, but we actually don't want to check the agent. We want to get the player first. So I'll actually go up here and write if player is equal to player agent. So this just converts our agent type to a player type. And then we can just go ahead and tab so we can have access to this player, and we want to check it for this player rather than the agent, and then put a colon here at the end. So if the player exists, then we don't want to initialize them because they already exist. They're already in the player map. So we'll just leave that blank and write an else statement down here. And in this, we want to initialize the player to the player map by saying if set player map player equal to, and then we want to set it equal to a type simulator custom player. Go ahead and add a bracket at the end of our if statement, and then in this we need to initialize our player like so. And just like that, they're now initialized in the player map whenever they join the match. I'll just go ahead and replace that with brackets. It's pretty much the same thing, but I like it because it looks prettier. And now that every player is going to be initialized in this player map and we'll have a player damage value, we can now work on making our enemies. So to do that, we want to go up here, and I'm going to create another class, and I'll call this our custom enemy, and it's just a class like so. And this class we want to be concrete. That's because we want to put editable components in this class. So the first thing that we're going to need is a health amount. So we'll write a health, and we'll make it a float equal to 0.0. And then we'll also make a defense stat of type float that we can assign. Next up, we want a way to show this health. So we're going to use a billboard. So health billboard of type billboard device, and I'll just initialize it with another billboard device. And then we need a prop that's actually going to represent this enemy. So I'll just call this our prop of type creative prop like so. And then lastly, we need our prop manipulator to check when this prop gets damaged. So this will be a prop manipulator device that we again initialize with another prop manipulator device. So now that we have our custom enemy here, we want to make an editable array of these enemies in our creative device class. So I'll just call this our enemies of type, and then we just make it an array of this custom enemy and initialize it with an empty array. Now let's go ahead and make a function that's going to initialize all of these enemies. So I'll just go ahead and go down here and call a function called initialize enemies. We don't need to send it anything. Then we just go down here and call and create this function. Doesn't need to return anything either. And in this function, we want to go through every single enemy in our enemies array, and do things for each of these enemies. So what do we need to do? First, we actually need to make a variable up here that's going to be the current health, and it's going to be of type float and initialized to 0.0. Then what we can do is in our custom enemy, we can go ahead and make a setup function, and it can be of type void. And in this, we want to set the current health equal to the editable health that is selected. And then down here in our initialized enemies, we just want to call this setup function for each enemy. So we will write enemy.setup like so. Now this function is going to be run for every single enemy in our enemies array that we added down here at the start of the game. And in this setup function, the first thing that we did is set the current health equal to whatever the maximum health is. The other thing we need to do is track when our prop manipulator receives a damaged event. So to do that, we'll write prop manipulator dot damaged event dot subscribe, and then we'll write on damaged, and then create that function down here. And if we go ahead and look in our prop manipulator, the damage event sends an agent. So we'll go ahead and receive an agent of type void. And for now, we'll write block. And then in this function, we want to set the current health minus equal to something. We need to subtract this amount from something. So for now, I'll just write 0.0, which will change later. But what we want to do is subtract this health from the player's damage. How do we do that? We do that by getting the custom player assigned with this agent that damaged the prop, and then getting that player's damage. To get the custom player assigned to this agent, we need to do a few things. First, we need access to our players map here in our manager device. So the easiest way to do that is actually to go up here, make a variable, and we'll call this our simulator manager of type simulator manager. So this is a reference to the creator device in our custom enemy class. And then whenever we initialize our enemies, what we'll do is set the simulator manager equal to, and then we need to set this manager equal to the manager that we're already inside of. So to do that, we'll write self. And then also make sure to set the enemy's simulator manager, because we don't have a simulator manager in this creator device. So now we actually have access to our simulator manager, which gives us access to our player map. Now that we have our player map, what we can do is get the custom player assigned to the agent here by writing if our CP for custom player is equal to the simulator manager. This is our simulator manager, which now will get the player map dot player map. And then in this player map, we want to get our agent. And what this will do is now we have a simulator custom player that is assigned to this agent. So if we go ahead and tab that, all we need to do here is write cp.players damage. Now it'll subtract the custom enemy's current health from the player who hit the custom enemy's damage amount. But there is a couple things that we need to do. First, we have a defense stat here, and that is not being taken into account. So what we'll actually do, we'll create a new damage variable here, and this is going to be equal to the player's damage amount minus the defense. And then we'll just go ahead and add this new damage here instead of the player's damage. But now we're just damaging the enemy. There's a couple more things we need to do, and one of those things is update the billboard to the new health. And we should also do that in setup whenever it's initialized. So for that, we'll write health billboard dot set text, and then in this we want to set the text to the health like so. But you see we get an error here, and that's because we need to return a message. So we need a function that's going to localize our string. For this, I'm just going to use a basic string to message function. The way I just did that by tabbing is actually using the verse extension verse language snippets. It comes with a lot of little snippets that will save you time, so I'd recommend that. Now that I have this string to message function, I can just go ahead and actually call that here and put my string inside of it. There is a bit of an issue with this, and that's that because this is a float number, this will display as 10.0000000, which we don't want. But to fix that, we'll just go ahead and convert the health to an integer before we set the text. So to do that, we'll just write new health in an if statement, and to convert, we'll use the function that's built into verse called int, and then we'll write our float, which is going to be the current health. And then now that we have our new health, which is an integer instead of a float, we can just go ahead and replace it here. And just like that, the billboard is now going to display the health. Let's go ahead and just duplicate that up here in the setup function so that the health billboard will also be initialized at the start of the game. So now that we have this health billboard updating properly, we need to check if our enemy now currently will just go into the negative health, which we don't want. We want the enemy to be eliminated. And so to do that, we'll check if the current health is less than or equal to 0. And if it is, then I'm going to call a new function called eliminate enemy, and I'll send it our agent who eliminated them. And then I'll go ahead and create this function down here. Make sure to receive an agent and return nothing. In this, the first thing that I want to do is set the billboard's text to nothing. And to do that, I'll just remove everything. Also, make sure to name your function correctly, like so. The next thing I want to do is hide our prop. So there is a hide function that is added to verse, so I could technically do prop hide, but I don't really want to do this because this hide function does have some issues and is a little finicky with different props, especially custom props. So instead, I'm going to teleport this prop. So I'll write if prop.teleport to, and then in this teleport to, I'm going to teleport it to the prop.getTransform.translation, and then prop.getTransform.rotation. So this will teleport the prop to its current location, but we don't want that. We want to teleport it to a location that is really far underneath the prop. So to do that, we'll subtract a vector 3 where the only value in that vector 3 is a z value, and we'll just set this to 10,000. This will just teleport the prop really low below the ground in the same location that it already is. And here we get an error because we need to be using spatial math. So just go ahead and copy and paste that up top. Another thing I want to do, and that is we need to reward the player for eliminating this prop. So to do that, I'll just go ahead and make an editable, and it's going to be a reward trigger of type trigger device, like so. And then we'll just go ahead and activate this trigger for the player. So reward trigger.trigger agent. You can connect this trigger to anything you want. This can be a custom verse mechanic or even just like an item granter that gives them gold. It doesn't really matter, but this is what you can use to actually reward the player. And just like that, the enemy will now be eliminated, but we also want the enemy to respawn after a certain amount of time, because we don't want the enemy to just be gone forever. So to do that, I'm going to create a new function called respawn enemy, and we don't need to send it the agent, but we do need to spawn this function because there needs to be a delay. So I'll go ahead and make sure this function is spawned and then go down here and create it. So I'll call this our respawn enemy. Make sure it suspends of type void, and in this for now I'll just write a sleep 0.0, but we don't want this to sleep for 0 seconds. Instead, we want to go up here and actually make a editable called the respawn delay of type float. This way you can have a different respawn delay for each enemy. Then we can go down here, make sure it sleeps for that respawn delay. And then after that, we want to basically do the same things we did here at setup. So we want to set the current health equal to the max health. We want to go ahead and update the billboard. And then lastly, we want to reshow the prop. And to do that, we want to teleport the prop. So I'm just going to copy this line where we teleported the prop here. And instead of subtracting this vector, we just want to add this vector so that it'll teleport the prop back up to its initial location. And just like that, our enemies are now done. But there is one more thing I want to do down here in our custom player. That is create a way to increase this player's damage. So to do that, I'll just go ahead and make a trigger, and I'm going to call this increase damage trigger of type trigger device, like so. And then with this, I'll just go ahead and get the triggered event. So increase damage trigger dot triggered event dot subscribe, and then we'll make a function called increase damage, like so. Now let's go ahead and create that function called increase damage. The trigger is going to take a optional agent. So I'll call this my maybe agent, and you create an optional agent like this. Make sure it's of type void. The first thing we're going to need to do is actually convert this optional agent. So to do that, I'll create a new variable called agent, and that is equal to our maybe agent, and this will just convert it back into a normal agent rather than an optional. Then we want to get the custom player similarly to how we did it up here. So I'll write custom player is equal to the player map, and we want to get the agent in this player map. So then just write set, and then we just want to increase the custom player's damage amount by writing set custom players dot damage amount plus equal to however much you want to increase, which for me is going to be 1.0. And also I wrote damage amount here, but it's actually called players damage, so I'll just go ahead and replace that. And just like that, we now have a way to increase the damage. We have enemies that can be damaged, and the enemies will respawn and display their health. Let's go ahead and test it out in game. So if I go into UEFN, hit verse, build verse code, then go into my content browser, we'll have the simulator manager here. In this, I am first going to get my trigger device for the increased damage. So I'll just go ahead and get a trigger device out, place it down, and then select that. Then we can go ahead and create our enemies. So for this, I'll just get some scarecrows out and place a few of them down. Make sure they face the player and then place a few of them down. Then I can go down here, add 3 elements to my enemies array. I'm going to start by selecting the prop. Then I'll make a health of, let's say, 10. This one's defense will be 0 because I don't want a defense for this. And we'll have a billboard device. Go ahead and drag it down, rotate it, make sure it's facing the right way. Then I'm just going to change the text so that it is easier to see and place it directly above my scarecrow. And then lastly, just give it a little outline. I'll duplicate this for every single one of my enemies here. Make sure I select the appropriate billboard that corresponds with this prop. Next up, we need a prop manipulator. Go ahead and drag it down. In this, you want to go down here and select affect all objects in a zone. Then I'm going to change the zone to be very small. Then lastly, turn on modify prop health and turn on is prop invulnerable because we don't want this prop actually breaking. Then I go ahead and position it here and duplicate this 2 more times for my other props as well. And now I can go down here and select the appropriate manipulator. Go ahead and select the first manipulator. Lastly, we have a reward trigger, which again is just going to be a trigger device that you can connect. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and get a item granter out, drag it down, make sure on grant is keep all, then add an item list. I'll just add like 10 gold, for example. And to connect them, I'll just go down here and write grant item and select this trigger and then on triggered. Then I just want to go ahead and select this reward trigger. Then lastly, we have a respawn delay, which I'll just set to 5. All right, this is our first enemy done. Now we just need to go ahead and fill out the same for the other 2. So go ahead and add a health, which this one I'll have as 15, maybe a defense of 2. Go ahead and select the billboard, the prop manipulator, and I'll keep the same reward trigger and also the same respawn delay. Then lastly, I'm just going to copy my settings from this one, maybe change the health to like 20, defense to 3, and change all of the devices over. And with this third enemy created, I do need a weapon though to be able to test this, which I'm just going to use my pickaxe. So to do that, I just need to make sure I go into my island settings and search for start with pickaxe and enable it. Now let's go ahead and launch session to test this out. So as you can see in game, if I go over here and hit this first monster, nothing's going to happen because I do not have any damage amount assigned to me. But if I go over here, it's actually going to go in reverse. And that's an issue because we don't want them healing whenever we hit them. So to fix that, let's actually go back into our code really quickly and open up the verse really quickly. And here, the issue is we're subtracting the defense from the player's damage. But if the defense is higher than the player's damage, then this will then be negative, which in turn increases the current health rather than decreasing. So to fix this, we'll just go ahead and make this new damage a variable of type float. That way we can actually change it. And what I'll do is just write an if statement and say if the new damage is less than 0, then we'll just set new damage equal to 0. And this way, if the damage amount is less than 0 and would in turn heal the enemy, then instead it'll just do 0 damage, which is what we want. So now just go ahead and build the verse code and push the changes so that that issue will be fixed. All right, so now in game, if I go ahead and hit these, all 3 of them should not take any damage. But if I go over here and click this trigger, which will increase my damage, and go over here and hit this one, and it's going to decrease. And If I go ahead and take it less than 0, you'll see it goes away completely. Then after 5 seconds, it comes back, and the same process can exist, and you can see I also got 10 gold for eliminating it. But if we hit these, our damage isn't enough to account for their defense yet, so let's go ahead and just click this a few more times. So after hitting it twice, now I'll do 1 damage and 3 damage to this enemy, then click it again, and now I'll do more, and I can actually do damage to this enemy as well. Also, if you want to get rid of this sample text here, just in UEFN, make sure to go ahead and clear your billboards. You can just remove the text, and then that won't appear. All right, and just like that, you now know everything you need to be able to make your own little mini simulator map. If you guys want a part 2, where I show you guys how to save the player's damage using verse persistence, so that the damage amount can stay in between games, make sure to like this video. If we hit 200 likes, I'll make that video next week. Also, if you found this video helpful, please go down and hit that like and subscribe button. We're trying to become the #1 map academy on YouTube, and we're almost there, so go hit that button right now. It'll take you 2 seconds. Anyways though, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.